get out here. This is what I call, it's what keeps me separated from you guys. Rushing up here, trying to get me to be quiet. I need a drink of water too. Everybody awake? Everybody good? Yeah. Y'all ready to go? Yeah. I know what you're thinking. I got to hear this guy one more time, right? Where's Todd at? When's he getting back? Trust me, if you just hang with me for like the next 4 hours, we'll be all right. We'll make it through together. We'll be good. I'm going to continue in this series we got going called One. And if you guys know me any, you know I like to keep, I think our Christianity is something that should be simple. Like, I don't think God made it difficult. I don't think he made it difficult to understand, because if he did, then a lot of us like me who are slow wouldn't be able to grasp it. And so today I want to talk about one step and how we are either one step getting closer to God or one step getting further from God. And the thing is I know that we learn from scriptures that, God has a plan for our lives, right? And that includes every detail of our daily living down to the simplest of things. And we can actually know exactly what it is. But the problem is that a lot of times I think we get concerned with a greater perspective, right? And we forget to focus on the individual steps that it takes to get there. We question God's will. We want to know what his will is for our lives. We want to know what the future holds. We want to know what his plans are for our lives, what our purpose is. But the thing is, I've come to the conclusion that some of us don't discover God's plan because we're looking for the wrong thing. We're looking too far ahead. And sometimes we expect God to show his blueprint for our lives, when really all he wants to show us is the next step we're going to take. So we get the mindset on seeing the whole picture, right? Because we like to see a guarantee at the end. We want to know where we're headed for. But by doing that, we're likely to overlook the next small detail of direction that God is trying to get to us. See, I think Christianity is simple willingness just to follow Jesus one step at a time. That's it. Just one step. Just focus on that one step. Don't worry about what the next day holds. Don't even worry about what 12 hours from now holds. Just worry about that next step you're going to take, wherever that step is. I think that's what it's talking about in Psalms 119, verse 105. It says, your word is a lamp to guide my feet and a light for my path. I don't know about you guys, if y'all ever camped and you have those lamps, those lanterns. Like, I always get the cheap stuff. I buy my flashlights at the Dollar General because I forgot, before I go camping. So it's a last minute thing. So I get the stuff that doesn't really light that well. That's kind of like a lamp. It only lights so much of your path. It lights just enough for you to see where you're going to take your next step. And to me, that's what God just wants. He just wants us to be obedient enough just to take that next step. Not worry what's beyond that step, but just to take the next one. I think that's how God guides us. He doesn't promise us a brilliant blaze of light to illuminate the road miles ahead. He promises a lamp for our feet, enough light just for the next step. And the thing is, if we get in too big of a hurry, if we want to get beyond that and we want to see what's going on, then we'll pass up our light and we'll end up in darkness. And while God has the whole journey of each and every one of our lives mapped out ahead of time, he conceives of that journey as a successive series of small steps. That's the way he makes it known to us. Can't be worried about getting ahead. And to me, that makes it simple. Man, if I could just worry about making sure my next step is following in the path of Jesus, man, it's easy. I don't have to worry about the next thing that comes. Just worry about that one. I think of it as like driving at night. Now, used to be that wasn't a big deal, but I'm getting older, so driving at night is a little bit more hard now because my eyesight ain't what it used to be. And the headlights on our car at nighttime, it just illuminates what we need to see, where we're going, the next bend in the road. But it doesn't show us the danger that is like 10 miles down the road. And I think that's how God wants it to be. He wants us to know that if we could see where our path was going, if we could see maybe the struggles that were ahead, the dangers that lie ahead, we probably wouldn't go that way anymore. I know I wouldn't. I know some of the stuff I've been through in my walk with Christ. If I'd have seen it coming, I guarantee I probably would have turned and went the other way. But the thing is, he didn't want us to see that. He doesn't want us to get off that path. He wants us to keep going. And if he was able to show us that path or give us the insight to that, then we'd turn away from it. And we wouldn't experience what we need to experience. We wouldn't get strengthened the way we needed to get strengthened, whether we like it or not. I think if he showed us the whole plan on the outset, we might decide that we don't want to be a part of it. Right? It might involve more sacrifices than we're willing to make. Our spiritual maturity might not be enough to where we can handle that at that point. So that's why he grows us. That's why it's called a walk with Jesus, man. We do it one step at a time. I like Psalms 119, 133. It kind of gives an insight as to basically throwing all care out. In other words, taking a step, not even thinking about it. It says, guide my steps by your word, and I will not be overcome by evil. See, God wants us to continually take next steps with him without hesitation. If we start worrying about where that's going to lead us, if we start worrying about what's going to happen, then we're going to hesitate. And he's like, look, if you just step with me, if you just come forth, don't worry about it. You'll overcome evil if you're just stepping towards me. But also notice that it only takes one step to completely change your direction, right? Like if you're walking in a straight line, you take one step the next way, you completely change your direction, and before you know it, the longer you go in that direction, the further away you're going to get from where you were once going. And like I said, we're always one step from getting closer to God or one step from getting further away. And a lot of us would like to remain neutral, right? I mean, we'd like to remain in a comfort zone. Like, I like my comfort zone, I don't want to get out of it. I'd love to say that, Christianity is just about coming and praying a prayer, receiving salvation, and being done. And then from that point on, everything just gets great, right? You get every promotion you ever wanted. Your parents get healthy and wealthy and can pass that on to you. Your kids start behaving. Everything just lines up and everything goes perfect. But of course, we know that's not how it goes. Because if we think about it, we think about trying to stay comfortable. We got to look at what God asked his son to do, right? The cross, right? That was uncomfortable. And if we have that, what I like to call that precious moments type faith, where everything is pretty and everything is great, and we have that attitude to think, well, God wouldn't ask me to do that. We hadn't read in Luke 9:23 where Jesus is saying, if any one of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross daily, and follow me. So we got our own crosses to pick up. Like I said, that cross is not a sign of comfort when it comes to what Jesus was put through. It's a sign of comfort from the outcome of it, though. We just got to be willing to grab it. And a cross is something we shouldn't pick up our own and then leave it at the door on our way out of church, or something we set aside in the corner of our house, and every time we get up, we just walk away without it. It says something that happens daily. In other words, we pick up our cross every day. It's not a prayer and you're done. It's a daily thing. I think when we understand that, we'll be able to better focus those one steps at a time towards Christ. And to think that we will be taken out of our comfort zone. I think about my walk, everything I've done has kind of been out of my comfort zone, you could say. Speaking in front of you guys, that's taking me out of my comfort zone. If you could ask anybody that knows me really well, that's known me a lot all throughout my life, they can tell you, I didn't talk. I didn't talk a lot, and I guarantee you I wasn't going to talk in front of a bunch of people. It just wasn't going to happen. But what I realize is there's a deception going on. Because I don't mean to offend you guys, but you're not intimidating, I'm a firefighter in Dallas, man. I put up with crazy stuff, man, and you guys just aren't that intimidating. And the thing is that I realize that what the devil does, he tries to trick us, making us think it's worse than what it is. In other words, if he can trick us into thinking it's too intimidating, you don't need to go out there, you just need to sit in your comfort zone and be quiet, then all that does is make me ineffective. So once I realized that, I realized seeking truth reveals more deception. Then I thought, you know what? It's a fight now. This is a war. I'm coming out here regardless if you like it or not, Because to me, it's not about giving a great speech. It's more about fighting what the devil wants to keep from me. He's trying to keep me in my comfort zone. He's trying to tell me, you can't do it. You can't get up there. And if I can just get up here and throw up, then hey, that's all I can do, And it won't be bad for me. It might be bad for you guys on the front, in the splash zone. But the thing is that I think the devil does that. He tries to keep us from taking one step further with God and keep us in our comfort zone. And that way we become ineffective. And it might seem harsh, but to me, an ineffective Christian is no different than an atheist. Because if you're not doing God's purpose, then what are you doing? Salvation isn't just for us to hold on to and not share it with anybody else. We can't become comfortable in assuming that we're not separating ourselves from God, that we're still growing closer. If we think, I do just enough to get by, I've got this, I'm saved, I'm good, and we assume that just because of that we're going to grow closer to Him, it leads to an empty path. Like I said before, if you're not growing, if you're not seeking, then you're separating. It's kind of like going uphill in a car with no brakes, right? You either push on the gas and move, or you're going to fall behind. There's no middle ground. If you're not getting closer, you're falling behind. We can't take the role as a spectator. We got to be a participator. Participators keep moving forward, keep taking that step. If we're called to be fishers of men, we can't be guardians of an aquarium. I know a lot of people who talk to me that like to think of church as, oh, this is where Christians come and hang out. And they get the strength to go out. I'm like, well, I hate to be rude, man, but if this is the only place just for Christians, it's going to be a boring place. We're supposed to be out. We're supposed to bring people in. Like I said, fishers of men. And we take that attitude that I do enough to get by spiritually, then we turn into what I would say is an average Christian attitude. You turn into an average Christian, your church turns into an average church, which basically ends up being nothing more than a building. It's the discipline that makes the difference. The discipline to say that every day, daily I'm going to pick up that cross. Daily I'm going to take each step. Daily I'm going to make sure that my step falls in line with the path that God is lighting before me. I'm not going to try to get ahead of it. I'm not going to try to go around it. But I'm going to stay on it. Discipline is the difference between average and abundant. I think every time I speak, I talk about John 10:10. I love that because God tells us, look, I want you to have abundant life. So I intend to grab that. I intend to take it. I intend to have the discipline to focus on every step in my journey. We need to quit focusing on who we need to become. I did this a lot when I first came to God. I was like, how does that look? How am I supposed to act? How am I supposed to dress? And by doing that, I got caught up in church culture, religion, Thought I couldn't listen to the music I listened to anymore. Couldn't dress the way I wanted to anymore. And what I found out was God was telling me, look, you're too focused on a bigger picture. You need to start focusing on the smaller things. I designed you to be who you are for a reason. You're going to reach other people that other people can't reach. And you need to focus. I'll make you who you need to be. You just need to walk in my direction. It's that daily commitment. And some of you know it's a minute-to-minute commitment for some of us, Some days are worse than others, right? I mean, it's easy to go day to day, but what about minute to minute? You're stuck in traffic. You're stuck in Walmart. It's not prayer, and I'm done, right? It's a daily thing. We need to realize that the prayer of salvation is not to get out of hell, but it's to make a commitment to follow. See, there's a difference. We have to daily make that decision to take one step closer to God. And like I was talking about, it won't always be easy. Sometimes it'll be a struggle. 1 Peter 2, verse 21 says, "For God called you to do good." And this is the hard part. "Even if it means suffering." Man, who wants to do good when you're suffering? Who wants to do good when things are bad? That's what I talk about. It's that discipline. That discipline to make sure you keep stepping that way, even when you're suffering. "For God called you to do good, even if it means suffering, just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example, and you must follow in His steps." It's a hard thing to do. Sometimes someone or something are going to frustrate you and make you want to take that step away. Something will tempt you. Something will create fear within you. Make you feel hopelessness, make you doubtful, make you feel worthless. And at that point, you're going to want to take a step away. At that point, you're going to want to go in another direction. But God says, look, I promise you abundance. You just keep stepping with me. That person or those people at your office that just irritates you. Those kids at your school. See, the point is, man, you're put there for a purpose, right? And it's not to get misled in your direction. It's to lead others in the direction of God. And that comes with the discipline. Because there's so many distractions out there right now, and the devil uses them to deceive us in an attempt to get us just to take one step. That's all he wants. If we can just take one step away, then he can lead us completely away from God's intention for us. Winston Churchill had this quote that said, "You'll never reach your destination if you stop and throw rocks at every dog that barks." And I love that. It's like, look, don't get distracted. In other words, don't look to your left or to your right. Stay centered. Stay centered on God. Stay focused. 1 Corinthians 9, verse 26 through 27 says, "Run with purpose in every step." Don't just shadow box. In other words, don't be fake. It said, "I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should." And I think that's the whole thing. We've got to intentionally purpose our steps towards the path, direction, and the firm foundation that is Jesus. Anything else is a trap. It's like a carrot on a stick, leading you away, leading you to step away, leading you into something else. And any step away from God, no matter how big or how small, is a path for destruction. And the thing is, if we don't see it any other way than what it is, we'll easily begin justifying those steps that are away from God. We'll start rationalizing it till it makes sense to us, to justify it to ourselves. We'll become those professional excuse makers, right? We'll be willing to sacrifice the life of abundance for the life of destruction. There's a story way back in Old Testament days of a guy named Lot. And it takes place in Genesis 13. And this to me is a perfect example of what happens when people of God take just one step away. Now, if you don't know the story of Lot, he was the nephew of Abram. And, just to give you a little backstory on it, they were men of God. They were blessed by God. They had herds of animals. And it got to the point where their herds got so big they couldn't share the same land. So they decided they were going to split up because the herdsmen are fighting each other, trying to share this ground. And Abram turns to Lot and said, "Hey, pick whatever you want. Pick whatever land you want." And in verse 12, it says, "So Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Lot moved his tents to a place near Sodom and settled among the cities of the plain." Now, that might not sound like much to you, but if y'all don't know the history of Sodom or what Sodom was, I think put it like this: it's like Vegas on steroids, right? It's like Vegas on steroids that was taken with a monster, chased with a 5-hour energy. I mean, it's like really crazy. These people, they run with scissors, they go swimming after they eat, they take candy from strangers. Whatever. I'm just trying to put it mildly, okay? This is church, right? But we're about to get into it. But the thing is that it was bad. And Lot, he knew this. He was a man of God. But yet, he decided to take a step away. I'm just going to go near it. I'm not going to go in it. I'm just going to go near it. And to me, that's a step called flirtation, right? Just flirt with it. How close can I get to the fire without getting burned? So he pinches it near. And to me, the question we should ask is, not how close can I get to sin, but how close can I get to Jesus? Because the closer we get to Jesus, the further we are away from sin. So it doesn't even matter at that point. And that's what taking a step is. So in Genesis 14, after Sodom just pitched a tent after Lot just pitched a tent near Sodom, war breaks out. Long story short, Sodom loses the war. And in verse 11, in Genesis 14, we pick it up and it says, the victorious invaders then plundered Sodom and Gomorrah and headed for home, taking with them all the spoils of war and the food supplies. They also captured Lot, Abram's nephew, who lived in Sodom, and carried off everything he owned. Now, if y'all remember earlier, he was just near it, right? He was just flirting with it. He was just near it at that point. And now we pick up the story, and he's living there. And I think he probably got that way through rationalization. Right? At first he flirted with it, and then he got near it, and he's like, well, he started rationalizing it to himself. Well, maybe this is not a big deal, right? Like, my kids go to Sodom High School, so I might as well move closer, right? Or, the Walmart there has a Starbucks, man, it's better there, I'm going to go there, And we just make up these excuses, rationalizing to ourselves, saying it'll be all right. It won't be a big deal. So he goes from taking one step, being near, now he's living there. And the thing is if you make excuses for something in your life, it's something you're living with that you should be living without probably. So we skip ahead 13 years later. Genesis 19. And at this point, God's had enough. Sodom is just bad. He's going to destroy it. And it says in verse 1, that evening 2 angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. Lot was sitting there, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet him. Now, that might not be a big deal, but in that time and in that culture, somebody sitting at the entrance of a city was a leader of the city. So we go from being near to living in to leading. All came from one step. All came from flirtation. Verse 2 goes on to say, he welcomed them and bowed with his face to the ground. My lords, he said, come to my home to wash your feet and be my guest for the night. You may get up early in the morning and be on your way. It continues on. They say, oh no, they reply, we'll just spend the night here in the city square. But Lot insisted, so at least they went home with him. Skip ahead to verse 4. It says, but before they retired for the night, all the men of Sodom, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. They shouted to Lot, where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out to us so we can have sex with them. So Lot's response, he steps out and says, please, my brothers, don't do such a wicked thing. Now, to me, if you're calling an angry, violent gang of rapists your brothers, your friends, that's a sign you've gotten off path. That's a sign that you stepped away and you kept going. If you can't consider something like this your friends. But it gets worse. Verse 8. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish. But please leave these men alone, for they are guests and are under my protection. Now, show of hands, every woman in here who is thinking that I wish Lot was my dad. Right? Exactly. Like, how do you get to this point? How do you think it's a good idea to offer your daughters to a violent mob of rapists? It all started with just one step. I'm wondering if maybe if we talked to Lot when he was with Abram and before he pitched that tent near, if we asked him, hey, how would you like your life to turn out? What he would have thought, yeah, I'd like to offer my daughters up to a violent mob. But the thing is, it only took one step. I guarantee you he didn't think that at the beginning. Pitching it near probably sounded like a good idea because I'm not in. But all he needed was his direction to be changed, and he headed down that path. That one step opposite of God led his life away from sin, and like I said, he sat with it for 13 years, and he became transformed. And I think that's the path it takes. We flirt with it, we rationalize it, and then it transforms us. And we become so accustomed and accept more sin because we allow ourselves to be around more. So it becomes just part of a normal everyday life. So, of course, we get deeper and deeper because a little is not enough. So then we get to the destruction phase, right? God's had enough at this point. He destroys it, fire. Lot walks off. His wife turns around, turns into a pillar of salt. But we get to verse 30, and it says, after Lot left Zoar because he was afraid of the people there, and he went to live in a cave in the mountains with his 2 daughters. So here's a man blessed by God, wealthy, have herds of animals. Now he's living in a cave, running. And it says later, one day the older daughter said to her sister, there are no men left anywhere in this entire area, so we can't get married like everyone else. And our father will soon be too old to have children. Come, let's get him drunk with wine, and we will have sex with him. That way we will preserve our family line through our father. What? Like, really? Like, where does that go? How do you think that way? And you got to remember, she was a daughter of Lot who led her off into a path too. She sat with that same sin for 13 years. And that's important to know. As parents, your kids are taking whatever step you're taking as well. So that's more incentive to make sure we're taking our step in the right direction. And like I said, do you think that when Lot pitched his tent near Sodom, when he took that one step off the path that God had chosen for him, that it would turn out like this? That flirtation leads to rationalization, which leads to transformation, which leads to destruction, ultimately. I like reading in Colossians, especially chapter 2, verse 6 through 7. It says, and now just as you accepted Christ, Jesus as your Lord, right? You prayed that prayer and you got saved. This is the important part. You must continue to follow him. Let your roots grow down into him and let your lives be built on him. Just as you accepted Christ, continue to follow him. That's the big word, continue. We got to continue to follow. I talked to Todd a couple times when I first started coming here, and my pet peeve, the thing that irritates me most about the idea of Christianity that people get involved in is that whole prayer of salvation and I'm done. And it's like, that's just the beginning. It's time to go to work once you receive God. It's time for your feet to hit the ground and you start taking those steps. Because Christianity is a process. It's not an accomplishment. It's like marriage, right? You don't have one another figured out right off the bat, right? Anybody in here got married and everything was just smooth? My wife's not in here. I can talk about her because I remember when we got married. She is a clean freak, right? Like it's got to be spotless. So me being the guy, I'm thinking, I'll help her out. I can vacuum. I can do stuff like that. So my job, I was going to sweep and mop. Well, as I was mopping the kitchen with the same mop that I mopped the bathrooms with, I felt this disturbance, right? I mean, the air just changed, and she came in there, and as a guy, I don't see nothing wrong with that. I don't know if anybody, but supposedly you don't mop everything else with the mop you mop the bathrooms with. So that's a process. I learned I don't do that anymore. That was a good way to say I'm not doing any kind of sweeping or mopping anymore. All right? But it's a process, My marriage right now is better than it's ever been. It's definitely better than the day we got married. And that's how our walk with Christ has to be. Man, it gets better. Yeah, you're going to go through struggles. Yeah, things are going to get hard sometimes and knock you down. But guess what? You get back up and you become stronger. But you also have to realize it's still a process. It's still another step you need to take. We like guaranteed results. We like to see the end and make sure it's going to be good, right? I'd love that too, but it doesn't happen. Like we want abs in 90 days, right? They advertise that. But if it took you 40 years to develop a beer gut, then how do you think it's going to end in 90 days with some abs, It doesn't make sense. I read this book by this guy named Brian Welch. I don't know if you guys know him. He was a guitar player for this metal band named Korn. And if you don't know his story, it's a great book. It's called Save Me From Myself. He actually got saved. And he left and he quit the band. And he started this ministry But what I like about his book is it's real. Because he was addicted to drugs. He was addicted to meth. And you'd think you have, like I said, the precious moment of faith, right? Where he'd tell you that, you know what, I came to God and everything was better. But he just talked about how worse it got. He talked about how he prayed to God high on meth. And how he continuously slip and fall. And it was just a process that was working out. And he had a comment, he said in his book, he said, you know, God just had a whole lot of hell to squeeze out of me. And I think that's poignant, you know. You know, if we get saved when we're 20, we get saved when we're 10, you know, it's just that we got to realize it's a process. It just doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't even happen in a lifetime. It's just a process of continuing and getting stronger and getting better. There's people that get distracted and think, you know, I've got to act this certain way. I've got to be this. Like I said, he was struggling with methamphetamine addiction, right? But he was a Christian. And you look at him and say, you can't be a druggie and be a Christian. Well, you know what? Sometimes it's a process. Sometimes you got to work that out. I met people who were strong and committed to God, and every once in a while a cuss word would slip out of their mouth. Guess what? Maybe that's just not what God is working with at this point. Maybe there's more important things. And it's the same way with our lives. Maybe there's more important things in your life that God needs to deal with at this point. We'll work on other stuff later. Don't think you have to be perfect and be this shining Christian example right off the bat. God's going to work and get you there. But like I said, you won't even reach it in your lifetime. It's just a process of getting stronger. There'll be setbacks, but it just means you get back up. You knock off the dust and you place that one step back towards Jesus. I've got an iPod. I got one of the old ones because I like a lot of music. So every time I stick it in the computer, it says connected, right? And when I start getting music that I want and putting it on there, it starts saying download and syncing, and it says do not disconnect. And sometimes it takes a little longer. You know, I wish I could download music a lot quicker than it does. But the thing is that I think that's the way God sees us. Like once we connect with him, he's like, do not disconnect with me. I'm trying to give you stuff, but don't be impatient. I'm trying to give you what you want. I'm trying to give you all this good stuff, but it's going to take a little time. Don't disconnect from me. It's going to take some time for you to be the husband you need to be, for you to be the wife you need to be, the parent you need to be. Don't disconnect. Keep going to church. Don't disconnect. Don't disconnect before I can give you what you need. And the thing is that a lot of times we look at our lives and we think we're going nowhere. But all the time God's saying, look, I'm raising you higher. I'm taking you deeper. And there will be a day when you're going to look back and you're going to say, man, he's brought me a long way. See, we shouldn't be concerned with the past or what the future holds as long as we can daily reflect on the declaration that's made in Psalm 17:5. It says, my steps have stayed on your path. I have not wavered from following you. See, God is calling you to greater things. I believe it and I know it. The question is just, will you allow his potential to be fulfilled in you by taking it one step at a time? That's all he asks. You guys stand, I'm going to pray for you.